We're back. We are live again, but with another session. We've been joined by a very familiar face to us, but not so familiar face to you guys. But welcome everybody. Welcome to Design and Experience. This is the second session of VV Fest Day 4. Thank you for those who joined just now for Through the Porthole. We're 2 sessions in. Here we go. And then obviously this afternoon we've got our sip and savor session as well. So if you're new today, if this is the first session you're joining in, thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Drop an ahoy in the chat. Let us know how you are. Let us know where you're at. If you were in the previous session, don't worry. You don't have to tell us where you are. We know where you are again, unless obviously you've changed it. Don't. Maybe you've gone somewhere else. Maybe we want to know where it is. Maybe it's now sunny in Wrexham again. I don't know. But this is the place where you're going to drop your questions into the chat there for Jamie as he goes throughout the session. Don't forget as well, we've got polls. So as we talk through the session, as we go through some of the cool facts and figures, make sure that you are answering those polls as well, because you could be within a chance of winning a voyage. But this is an amazing session, right? Myself and Layla are very excited. Or is it Layla and I? Probably Layla and I, actually. Layla and I are very excited about this session. There we are, Lindsay. It is sunny in Wrexham now. There we go. That's it. I prayed for this to happen. But yes, Layla and I are very excited about the session. We are joined by the master of curated experiences on board. For those of you who are wondering, who designed this ship? Who made this incredible experience? Who thought Test Kitchen was going to be a great idea? Well, I'll tell you what, we've got the guy. It's an exclusive, all right? Because I think this is probably the first time we've wheeled you out, Jamie, in front of...
It probably is. It probably is, guys.
Yeah. So this is an exclusive, guys, for you all to enjoy. The guy, Jamie Douglas, I'll let him introduce himself, but we're going to go through our design experience. Jamie, do you want to just tell our first mates, what do you do and where you come from?
What's my name? Where do you come from? Yeah.
What's the time? What's the time so people can see?
The time is 5:35 a.m. In Miami. So apologies if I'm sounding gruff. I have just rolled straight out of bed. This is no makeup vibes. So and it's definitely dark in Miami. So that's good. But yeah, no, my name's Jamie Douglas. I've been working for Virgin Voyages. It'll be my 9th year tomorrow. So I basically helped start the business in 2015. And kind of my role here was basically to be the design director at the start and basically kind of curate all the kind of the design vision for the ship. And then latterly that's kind of rolled into obviously protecting all the design for it and being the guardian for that. And then ultimately all of the kind of the experience that goes with that. And then also something as well that we're calling immersive experiences now as well, which we can kind of touch on just at the end here. But so why don't we kind of jump straight in? I know we've only got 45 minutes and I do like to talk. So please kind of ask any questions or shut me up on some of these things. So first of all, like, why did Virgin want to go into kind of the cruise industry? I think that's always kind of like a good place to start. I previously used to work at Virgin Atlantic, and I know kind of a lot of other people did within the Virgin businesses. They've always kind of worked at other kind of Virgin companies. But ultimately, why we thought Virgin Voyages was going to be a really good idea was basically because as soon as Virgin has like a physical asset that they can layer on the top of a service-driven piece, that's when we seem to kind of really win. And then especially added to that is the kind of the value for money aspect. So if you're going to spend £1 with us, you will always get more versus like the other experiences, let's say, that you kind of get with. So like I said, we already had kind of hotels going on. We already kind of conquered the air. Someone was also trying to conquer space. And then now, obviously, we were kind of trying to conquer the sea at the time as well. So that's why we thought that this would be a great idea, because, again, the kind of the quality that Virgin can bring. So when you actually look back, like what we wanted to kind of create the narrative on was, when you like, zoom all the way back to kind of like let's say the yesteryear of kind of Grand Ocean liners, there was something so romantic about this. There was something like steeped in luxury. And again, apologies for anyone that has kind of worked at cruise lines or designed cruise ships before or been part of other cruise lines, whatever. So this is, again, no offense to any of you guys that have kind of done anything else in the industry, but from a, like, let's say, a newbie's perspective looking in on this, we almost felt like the whole kind of romance had been lost on this. So really kind of, we kind of saw like taking kind of notes from the kind of the yesteryear piece. So as you go through as well, like and when you actually, like, from a design perspective, start to really look at that kind of those ships, it was very sophisticated. The design details, the craftsmanship that went into these, the celebration moments on these pieces were absolutely phenomenal. And almost like these were kind of seen as like life-changing transformational experiences as well, that people were traveling, whether it was from kind of like Liverpool to New York. People were often like not always going for kind of well, rarely it was holidays. It was more to literally change their life. So again, we were like wanting to kind of lean into these pieces. Interestingly as well, like when you say kind of cruise to people, and I'm sure you guys get it more than most, is like if people hadn't cruised before, people are always a bit like, oh, like I'm not sure that's for me. However, if you said that you're going to a yacht on Monaco, everyone's like, oh my God, that's incredible. This is absolutely like the most glamorous thing you can do. So the notion of sailing and voyaging is still very, very glamorous. It's just literally the way that we package it. So again, like taking kind of notes from like kind of the super yachts and also the kind of the exclusive locations where these things will go. I think that's where we kind of wanted to kind of put the, let's say, kind of like the sexiness back into some of these pieces. So I hope these things are kind of making sense, that obviously everything you've kind of been learning in the past couple of years about our brand, like this is kind of like how it kind of came to life. The other thing was, we originally launched with the name Virgin Cruises, and I think that's actually still our kind of legal name ultimately. However, like part of the way through, it's like, right, if we really want to kind of set ourselves different and kind of change the bar with what we are doing, is that we moved away from the name Cruises and went to Voyaging, because really is about, like, when you say kind of a cruise, it kind of like denotes like a certain kind of list of adjectives that ultimately like is kind of hung up on certain things, whereas like when you say the word voyaging, it's a lot more adventurous, it's connecting with the ocean, it's like you're actually going somewhere, it's exciting. And I think that was the other thing that we kind of felt, that like the rest of the cruise industry had kind of lost their way a little bit, because ultimately, if you're going on an airplane, you want to sit by the window, you want to see outside, you want to see that kind of 35,000 or 30,000 foot view. Like, and it's the same thing on a cruise ship. Like, you want to be like, if you've selected a holiday on a cruise, on a ship, like you want to be kind of connected with that ocean outside world. So again, you'll see with our kind of public area designs, like a lot of it, and especially our cabin design, it was all around kind of like connecting with the ocean more, so, having kind of those big expansive views, because again, ultimately, what's better than like having your own kind of personal kind of 3 meter by 3 meter view of this kind of expansive ocean land. And so also when we were kind of looking through with the materiality, which I'll talk about in a second, the kind of the sea and the ocean was very important within this. This is obviously a bit of a rude statement, but ultimately what we kind of resulted in, we thought that the kind of the cruise business was a bit of a sea of mediocrity, because it was just like, we felt like we could kind of change many parts of it. And so really what we basically came up with the strap line, it was time to create like an epic sea change. And how we were going to do this was by celebrating the ocean, providing a yachting experience to the masses, reminding everyone of the golden time of ocean voyages, and then ultimately create a ship which enjoys the best modern contemporary design. That was kind of like the goal. But then ultimately from that was kind of the main overarching piece. And then we came up with the strapline of, right, what the design vision was going to be was the modern romance of sailing. And so this is what we always use to kind of measure everything that we did and everything we do and everything that will kind of lead forward on this as well. And I will happily kind of do like a trivia quiz or anything next time you guys are on board, and I want you to go around all of the things that I'm going to kind of tell you now. It'll be great for you next time you guys go on board to actually see and understand, like, oh, this is what Jamie was banging on about various materiality pieces or why they did things, because it all ladders back to this. So I'm hoping that kind of this then starts to make sense. Anyone that's been on board, and I hope a lot of you guys have, that this is going to start making a lot more sense. So ultimately, the modern romance of sailing was our design vision. But it wasn't just from, like, let's say, kind of an architect's interiors product design perspective. It was almost everything that we live and breathe with it, because ultimately, like, we have to have this kind of central core brand identity idea that everything ladders up to, because otherwise it's just going to fall apart. So when we're kind of actually kind of thinking about these the bigger pieces, that was at the heart of our business. So everything from the cabins and the suites to the music programming to the menus and collateral, the uniforms. Like, you can then start to see that we've got this like North Star in some respects, which was the modern romance of sailing, that we can measure things against. So keep that in mind. So then, in some respects, how do we actually measure then the romance of sailing to ensure that our experience like delivers on this? And this is again from like an interior like design architect product design point of perspective. So we had kind of three main criteria: modern and contemporary design. We always knew that Virgin is a modern company. It's like bleeding edge on many things. We also knew that at the time we were going to get the ship in 2020, which, you know, latterly was the kind of the worst time to receive a ship. However, like we know that the ship was going to be the most modern ship that Fincantieri had produced at the time. So we always knew that we had to have a modern kind of approach to design. The second piece was riff off the nautical vernacular. And when you look into obviously the kind of the maritime and the nautical kind of traditions, and from everything from the actual traditions itself, the rituals that went on to the materiality, there were so many things that we could basically pull from that were absolutely incredible. So obviously everybody knows about the tattoo parlor on board. Like that was obviously born out of kind of like the nautical sailor traditions of, you know, getting tattoos when they crossed the equators or whatever it was going to be. So you can see how kind of these things started to bleed in across the whole of the business structure. And then ultimately the third one was to celebrate the oceanic elements. Like you're literally floating on kind of one of the best landscapes of kind of material, color palette, like basically taking natural inspiration from all of the pieces that we kind of float on. So you'll start to see within the public areas where this starts to make sense. And normally I kind of do this as a walking tour around the ship, but ultimately this kind of starts to make sense. So when we break that down even further, what does that actually mean? So when we talk about modern contemporary design, we kind of, in the suites, for example, we are kind of evoking retrofuturism. This was really kind of like capturing the optimism of yesterday's visions of tomorrow. So like you'll see kind of lots of kind of curvaceous pieces within the suites. We inspire with contrast. So there's lots of kind of striking different kind of juxtapositions on the ship. We also wanted it to feel like individual areas as well. So each of the restaurants obviously feels very individual. We tried to make kind of more of a neutral palette, let's say, between all of the restaurants and public area spaces to kind of keep that kind of like cohesive nature together. We play with light a lot. So I think one of the most obvious things is obviously kind of the mood lighting in the cabins. Virgin is a very kind of playful, colourful brand. From historic reasons, really. Like obviously Virgin Atlantic was one of the first people to put mood lighting on planes. From a scientific and environmental and just kind of an experience perspective, you can do a lot with light. You can change people's moods. You can make food look better under the right lighting. You can do so many things with it. And so we always knew that we wanted to really kind of lean into that and kind of do it. And I think one of the basic things was like even the lighting on the side of the ship, like the fact that we can kind of now celebrate the communities that we visit by putting a Hoy Ibiza or whatever it's going to be on the side of the ship, which is always kind of creates a smile for the kind of the locals as well. We will always be kind of cheeky, sassy and irreverent as well. So we always kind of like, we never kind of cross the line of going into crass, but we will always kind of make people smile with the kind of the right nautical pun. Sometimes we go probably a bit too heavy on the puns sometimes that people don't understand us, but it's always kind of, it's fun to keep it cheeky. The second big portion was, like I say, celebrating oceanic elements, and so this is where we really wanted to kind of connect into the water was kind of in some respects, the easier one. So you'll see that in the public area pieces, you've got like the biggest windows, like everything on the ship is looking out. So rather than basically having like a kind of like a centered ship where we felt like a lot of the other cruise lines were kind of like focusing into the center of the ship, but what we wanted to do was open everything and looking outwards. So that's kind of why we went with what was called a tower design ship, where we basically had kind of like the public area block at the bottom and the top, and then the kind of the accommodation block in the middle, but everything was looking out. Inspiration from nature, obviously, like as you kind of walk around the ship, there's so many kind of materiality palettes that kind of look at the kind of like exactly taking inspiration from nature, where you've kind of got like, for example, like the dichroic glass in the suites that obviously kind of is meant to be kind of the iridescence of the underwater. You've kind of got like the crushed coral of the terrazzo floor. So there's so many things that kind of go in there. Heightening the sensory experience, like we always wanted to kind of like kind of create high and low points, lookout points, all of that stuff. So like again, kind of connecting with the outside, framing the view as well. That's similar to what we were talking about in terms of like the great expanse of all of the kind of actually to the outside world. So in the cabin, for example, even when you're walking back to the bathroom, let's say, there's a mirror position that when you look in it, you're actually still looking at the ocean. When you walk into the cabin, obviously, you know that we've kind of got like the automatic drapes that open up to really present that view and again connect you with the ocean of why you're there. Riffing off the Nautica vernacular, this is kind of like the funnest one, because ultimately this is like looking about all of the kind of the amazing kind of things that have been from the past. Also, it's all about looking at the sexy yachts and various things like that. So again, we took so many kind of cues from yachts and mega yachts for these things, like even just like the color of the ship, for example. Like we knew that we were going to be lined up with a kind of against 10 other kind of white ships. We knew that Disney had kind of nailed it with kind of the blue and the whites in that kind of very kind of like traditional style, and it looked incredible. We knew that we had to stand out from that crowd, and what better way to do it in that kind of the sleek grey, and then obviously again layering on the kind of the mood lighting on top of that as well. Amazing scale and details. Like we always kind of like look into the kind of the details of certain things and kind of really like go into that extra mile. So you'll probably see like the corkscrew within the cabin, for example, that we kind of let the sailors use. That was based off a sextant. You unscrew it, you can open the bottle of wine. So we're trying to really kind of layer in all of these little elements into the design. The frame lines, windows, and doors. Like I think most people, if you've been on the ship, you might have been wondering what these kind of vertical numbers are when you go around the ship. Like definitely in the kind of the grounds club area, we basically have kind of these lights that have got like different numbers on. So frame lines are how you used to basically kind of design or plan for a ship. So it would start at the back would be 0, and it goes all the way up to a number, however long the boat or the ship is that you're making. And again, we wanted to kind of create these pieces that we could talk to the sailors about, the crew could talk to the sailors about, and really kind of celebrate the kind of the nautical yesteryear that was going on. So for example, when we used the frame line numbers, we actually used them from a cabin numbering perspective. So the first 2 numbers or single number would be your deck number. Then the next 3 numbers would then be the frame line number, if that's where you're actually staying. And then you had the A or the Z or A or the Z, as I'm speaking to mostly English people, which is good, on the actual kind of the corridor perspective. So again, this is where we kind of layer in these narratives and stories. Classic shipbuilding materials, like obviously there's a reason why kind of ships are made of certain material, because it works, and so we kind of again wanted to lean into so many of those things and kind of use them where in best practice ultimately. So again, next time you go on the ship, have a think about those 3 things that I just told you, and I think it really starts to kind of ring true, and then people start to understand like kind of the layers that kind of what we've got going on the ship. So when we basically then applied that to kind of the standard cabin, so we also knew that kind of from a cabin perspective, we wanted to do something that was like a little bit different. We knew that the suites were always going to be like a very premium product, but the standard cabin, we felt that we wanted to kind of connect with ultimately the 99% of people that were actually going to travel with us were always going to be in a standard cabin versus a Rockstar or Mega Rockstar cabin. So we knew that we wanted to do something that was kind of a little bit more special. So again, like normally every kind of design projects, we always go and take inspiration, see what the competition's doing. So we obviously compared all of the kind of the cruise lines at the time. We then looked at kind of like a much more of a kind of a ground product, because we thought that, again, attracting our new demographic, that we knew that we wanted to kind of like, we were going to get measured against these like more kind of city-driven, cosmopolitan places that people would have those kind of touch points to. So Citizen M, for example, anyone that's stayed there before will know that it's kind of like based on a container, which is very similar to actually a cruise cabin. So that was kind of a good kind of segue on that. W Hotel was the first boutique line that, again, kind of resonates with our brand. Yotel, obviously this is kind of based on the kind of the Japanese rooms. However, the interesting thing about that was it's just kind of an interesting use of space. So it obviously always had to be kind of multifunction at the time. Because when we actually did kind of our first testing with kind of market research of people of this, we asked 1,000 people we got 1,000 people that had cruised before, 1,000 people that hadn't cruised before. And the main feedback was that the people that had actually kind of cruised before said that the cabins felt small. and then the people that had never cruised before, they have the perception that the cabins would be small. So again, that's why we kind of like started playing around with this kind of like multifunctioning piece. And obviously the fourth one there, Virgin Hotels, kind of our kind of a brotherly company. So we always knew that we had to kind of benchmark ourselves against Virgin Hotels. The other kind of like slightly more left field thing that we wanted to do was really benchmark ourselves against like true experiences that really kind of celebrate where they're from. And so if you imagine like going on a safari, for example, like you wouldn't be staying in a hotel, you would be staying in kind of like almost a glamping style tent setup that is celebrating the environment that you're in and really kind of like immersing you in that. So that these are the kind of the other kind of like slightly left field, but actually kind of more centered on what we were trying to achieve with our approach when it came to the cabin. So then we started comparing the kind of traditional cabin layouts. And so ultimately, for anyone that knows this, apologies, but like I'll explain a little bit for anyone that doesn't how kind of like the cabins are designed historically. So basically imagine two pieces that kind of get pushed together. That is called like an interlocking cabin layout. And so you will see where the bed heads come through, they basically push through to either side of the cabins, and you're basically kind of like in some respects stealing space from next door. But what it really does is kind of create, from an architectural point of view, it creates this kind of like slightly janky kind of like 90-degree kind of kink through the room. Because ultimately the most precious piece of cabin or the most precious piece of space within the cabin is the end of the bed. So as long as people can get through past the end of the bed, that's what basically all the cruise line companies are trying to protect, that piece, so you can still walk through to the balcony. So when you looked else around kind of around the kind of the cabin areas, you kind of always had like a vanity unit, which was always useful and always used. You always had like a sofa piece, which then became like, it was often like a low grade sofa that like you didn't really sit on it. It was more of a backdrop, so it was kind of like, this is a bit of a strange thing to have in the room. You always felt like as you were walking in, you were kind of always walking against two hard surfaces as well. So imagine walking in this particular cabin, you'd be kind of like squeezing past the bathroom. You'd be squeezing past the bathroom to kind of go forward. Again, like that, moving away from the presence of everything feeling small, and then obviously you go onto the balcony. Which again, we felt like no one kind of celebrated the balcony as much as we could possibly do. So this led us then to be like, right, I want to create the kind of an oasis in the cabin. So not to say that kind of like the rest of the ship was crazy and we had to escape and this become this complete retreat, but we knew that also like this was your personal time, this was your personal space. So you wanted, like, when you came back to this piece, you really did want it to be kind of like a relaxation within it. Like, even if you wanted to spend an extra 10 minutes in the cabin, we know that a lot of other, we know that all cruise lines are ultimately trying to get people out of the cabin to spend money elsewhere. But ultimately, if we could kind of get people to relax or not kind of fear that, I'm sure everyone's kind of had those like kind of weekends away before where they end up booking the wrong hotel, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to stay out in these cities all day now instead of actually feeling confident and going back into my room. But we always wanted people to feel that they could come back at any time and really kind of enjoy this. So what we came up with was basically this kind of AM PM design, and we've kind of like, we've promoted this a little bit, but I think we can do like a lot better job in terms of kind of like promoting the kind of the seabed concept that we kind of came up with. But ultimately what we felt was we could always have this AM and PM room. So this is where we kind of invented the seabed. And ultimately what this allowed us to do was kind of change, like I said before, the need from kind of a sailor at the AM is very different to what a sailor needs in the PM side. So this is where we kind of came up with the kind of the seabed or sofa bed ultimately. What this then allowed us to do as well, from the architectural point of view, we basically put kind of what we called like the joggle wall in, which was this kind of like soft line that goes all the way through the cabin. So instead of having this kind of like 90-degree kind of fitment, it would be like a softer piece. So when you actually walk into the cabin, all of the kind of the architectural walls around you are a lot softer, and they're pointed in the direction that you want, which is ultimately out of the kind of the balcony door. So again, from a calming perspective, it really kind of like, yeah, it does exactly that. It allowed us to kind of push out the bathroom a little bit bigger. That's how we could get away with like the roomy rain shower in there. Obviously still allowed us to have a nice vanity desk. It basically gave us a bit more usable space as well, put a lounge chair in there. And then ultimately kind of, we wanted to kind of relook at what we were going to do from a hammock perspective. So when we then looked at the overall kind of perception of the cabin, it was then right. We were going to celebrate the modern design approach with the view. So it was all about the view. So that's where we kind of put the like the PIR sensor in the room. So when you walk in, the drapes open, the lights dim. Again, it was all focused on that. You'll also notice when you walk into the cabin, there's kind of 3 pops of red as you go through this. So you basically have the pop of the throw on the bed, pop of the stool underneath the vanity, and then you've got the hammock on the far end as well, and it's all to draw your eye out of the window, basically. The transitional space, we knew, again, like people were kind of going to be using this at different times of the day for different needs, so we thought that was kind of a good idea. And again, going back to this kind of what's happening in modern cities around the world now is obviously everyone has to use space in a better way. Clever cabins, we wanted it to be kind of more intuitive. So not only with the PIR sensor, but every time you walk back into the cabin, the lights would change. Because again, like you've had it before where you come back late at night, you hit the light switch, every single light comes on in the house. We didn't want that. We wanted somebody to walk in and the lighting to be on a timer. So we would do the heavy lifting from a tech part, but actually when you walked in, we would try and nail it on the right kind of lighting level, so you didn't have to do that. From the balcony perspective, obviously the hammock, the first time I presented this, there was 50% of the people in the room that were like, everyone's going to die. Everyone is literally going to swing off the side of the ship. Everyone's going to die. The other people were like, this obviously makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, like the hammock is like a sign of relaxation in itself. Like, why wouldn't you want to be sitting on a hammock in the middle of the ocean, swinging, eating food on there, whatever it is. But it was just like, ultimately, like this is like the kind of the ultimate thing that we also wanted. Again, selfishly, like we knew that we were going to be parking up against other cruise lines. We knew that if somebody was sitting on a hammock the other side, and you didn't have a hammock on the other ship looking at our ship, you would be like, man, I wish I was on that hammock looking the other way at us, kind of thing. So, like again, there was this perception from the outside, but ultimately, why wouldn't you want to do that? Again, thinking what I said about kind of the nautical traditions, all of that stuff, it's very kind of sailor-like too. So there's a lot of kind of standard cabin design feature wins in there. I won't go through them all, but we'll obviously kind of send this around afterwards so you can kind of look at that. But I hope, like I say, these things are starting to make sense. But ultimately, kind of like what we ended up with was a lot more kind of a relaxed approach to a cabin. Rather than kind of being tight and formal, it definitely was more kind of like holistically relaxed. So again, what that then led us on to was kind of think about other kind of product design that went with it. So, for example, Ship Eats. So Ship Eats, anyone that's not heard of Ship Eats before, it is basically our room service. And so when you think about kind of traditional room service, whether it's in a hotel, whether it's on a ship, basically what people have tried to be doing was designing a restaurant service, not in a restaurant, which doesn't make sense. So again, when you actually kind of map these things out, like you will have either kind of seen the cling film wraps that you're seeing there on the screen, you will either see the dog bowls, and you will have definitely walked down a kind of hotel corridor before, then had to step over people's food in the corridor. Like you will definitely have kind of experienced one of these at some point. So we kind of set the design challenge on ourselves that like we needed whatever this thing was going to be, it had to present well. The food temperature was always good. The crew needed to deliver it easy. We obviously had a lot of the kind of the public health areas that we needed to kind of tick off. It needed to be sustainable. It needed to be easy to use for the sailors. It needed to be easy to store. And then ultimately, one of the other big things was like we wanted to get rid of this like mess down the corridors of kind of these removal pieces. So what we came up with was again going back to this kind of more relaxed nature, going back to this oasis piece, going back to the modern romance of sailing. We actually kind of wanted to go down this kind of the glam picnic style. So we wanted something to be relaxed. We wanted the kind of the vessel to actually kind of encapsulate all of the food. And then knowing that kind of like we wanted to kind of people to explore this within their room, I kind of set the challenge that we wanted people to be able to eat this with one hand as well. That we don't really tell that very often, but ultimately the dishes are designed to be held with one hand, and we almost wanted to give people like a spork, which is like a spoon and a fork, to literally eat within the hammock. So that is kind of like the concept of why we kind of came up with a certain menu. We knew that it wanted to scale, so we knew that kind of like if you were going to order, what's thing for one person, or if you had 4 people in the cabin, this thing could just go up and down. And we wanted it to be kind of an intelligent design that would make people smile. So what we ultimately came up with was Ship Eats, and so we kind of took took kind of reference from like Indian tiffin boxes that would kind of stack on the top of each other. We obviously, like the big kind of nautical cue there was obviously the sailor bag. That kind of rolls up, rolls down. We also wanted to kind of solve the kind of the slightly awkwardness of like when you think about when you order room service, it's sometimes it is just because you want to enjoy the cabin, but also sometimes it's because you're hungover. You don't want to be seen. Like you actually just want to lock yourself away from the world. You don't want to see anybody at all. You might be in a mad rush because you're getting ready to go out, whatever it is. So like you had very different kind of criteria of why people were ordering room service. So this is the sailor bag was also very good because it could hook on the handle. The crew member could ring the doorbell. The door could actually open without the bag falling off. And then you didn't have that kind of awkward getting caught short in a towel, you know, kind of like somebody posting something through the door on these things. Because normally, again, what would happen on these room service, it would normally turn up on this like probably the tray the size of the bed, and then somebody would kind of clunkily walk in and kind of drop it in your cabin. So we wanted to remove that kind of awkwardness from there as well. So ultimately, again, that's why we kind of ended up with this type of product. But you can start to see how we started to kind of build these kind of layers in. And obviously that guy there enjoying the hammock, with Shippy. So that's ultimately why we kind of wanted to do that. But again, I hope this is kind of displaying kind of like the layers of the modern romance of sailing and all these kind of pieces, just kind of see the detail that went into all of these different pieces. And this is obviously just one thing that is kind of one of many. I'm now going to I know we've only got 15 minutes left, but I know we're just going to change gear a little bit now into what we now call the immersive experience. So ultimately, if you imagine kind of we set the design vision of the modern romance of sailing as a business, that was what we were going to follow. So the design vision was set. We then had an entertainment vision that was kind of set off that too, because if you imagine if somebody walked into a very kind of modern space or a certain space and then the entertainment didn't match what we were doing on board in terms of a decor perspective, it would start to feel odd. Now we're kind of like 5 years into service ultimately, obviously with the 2 years out for COVID, but we're now kind of 5 years old from these points. We know that we're now going to be going into dry dock in November. Scarlet Lady, which we're going to have kind of some exciting features coming up and kind of tweaks on that, which we definitely heard kind of from sailor feedback. So we collate all of those things and kind of like improve what we want to improve on. But other things that we are looking at doing, we know that we have a very high return rate of sailors. So something that's really important to us is a piece that we're owning as well called immersive experiences. This is what we use as the title, like inside our company. I think it's going to be kind of called something else, but ultimately it's probably specialty voyages. It will be like that is something that it's akin to. We will be launching kind of hopefully a website by the end of, it's probably going to be the end of July now, but you'll start to see more of this. So it's a lot more of a kind of centered place. But the reason for these immersive experiences is ultimately to kind of really kind of drive and heighten what our original kind of core pillars were when it came to kind of the entertainment side of things. So we just did one a couple of weeks ago called Elevate, which is all around kind of the wellness side of things. So we're already very high on the fitness and wellness scale, but we also kind of wanted to, again, kind of really drill in and kind of like heighten all of that piece. So this is where you can see that we're kind of starting to kind of like say use kind of our kind of core pillars and kind of make them better. So like, for example, from an F&B perspective, we're doing the Eat and Drink Festival, which is starting in a couple of days. We will do kind of a couple of others that I'll talk you through. But I was just going to give you kind of the highlight for the rest of the year of what we're looking at doing on the immersive experience side. So Celebration Voyage, I know that like normally kind of cruise lines did like a kind of like a CEO or president's cruise as a kind of a loyalty piece. Not going to lie, I thought that sounded pretty boring. So we wanted to kind of celebrate our own kind of like way of doing things. So yes, we wanted to kind of give people like a peek behind the curtain of kind of VV in itself. So we on these cruises, we're getting all of the SLT on it, and so we can really kind of connect with the sailors. But the other second option that we wanted to do was Virgin as a brand is so kind of like reaching far and wide. We've got so much breadth and depth to it that we really wanted to kind of educate and inspire sailors through the interaction and awareness of other Virgin companies too, because I think everyone on this call is probably more kind of European. So when you actually say the word Virgin, people always think about, oh, Richard Branson, the innovator, the marketer, you know, that kind of like entrepreneur side of stuff. When we actually kind of did the same study in America, when we we're first starting the cruise line, we actually asked people like what Virgin meant to people, and the first thing that, like, the number one answer was coloured lighting on planes. It didn't come back as the man, the entrepreneur, or any of the other, even the spacecrafts. It was like this weird kind of lighting piece. So again, that just kind of sparked us that we actually can have a lot of kind of fun with kind of the other companies and kind of improve awareness. So what we'll be doing on these celebration voyages, I think you may have heard that we kind of secured Boy George on these, which is great because, again, from a Virgin history and a Virgin records perspective, we wanted to kind of like celebrate these moments. So we will always be doing kind of like top deck parties with George. Richard Branson's going to be joining. We're doing cocktail hour hosts with those people. We're doing Virgin brand sessions with the speaker sessions with the guests that are coming on. So anyone that kind of came on last year, we're doing very similar things, but kind of, again, kind of heightening it from last year as well. Last year was very successful, which is great, but now Richard got so excited, instead of doing one, he wanted to do 3 in 1 week, which is slightly interesting. But ultimately, we see this as kind of like a really kind of big celebration of all of the Virgin brands coming together. But ultimately, we will be celebrating our kind of loyal sailor club. So we'll always be doing loyalty activations and the private 485C members. So if you look across the board, we're kind of linking with, obviously, Richard Branson. Boy George is going to be on every voyage. We've got the Galactic, we've got astronauts on every single one. We've got Virgin Atlantic disruptors on each one. Again, the reason why it was important to get Virgin Atlantic guys on is because it was the 40th anniversary of their business this year. We're connecting with Virgin Unite as well, so there's a big kind of charity component of it. Virgin Radio, Virgin Red, Virgin Hotel. So you can start to see that kind of like, it's not just like us that is kind of being celebrated. It is all of these people kind of coming on board to kind of create these kind of really cool experiences for the sailors. Like when we kind of put the astronauts on last year, like I've never seen the Red Room as big as it was, because again, there's just such interesting topics, and again, it's just really kind of interesting to kind of be able to provide that to the kind of the sailors. So have a look for the celebration voyage. One of the other pieces that I wanted to talk around was the comedy festival. So I think this is probably more for you guys in Europe as well, from the UK side. So this is something that is kind of released. It's going to be on the 14th and 19th, a Brazilian lady sailing out of Portsmouth. So this is our first step into the kind of the comedy world, and have like a let's say kind of a dedicated voyage to it. So when I say this is going to be like an immersive experience comedy festival, what do I mean by that? We're not going to change any of the other programming. So you will still get Scarlet Night, you will still get all the other pieces. We will just add more comedy onto it, basically. And so this is like how we're kind of going to program it through. So any kind of future prospective sailor won't miss out on anything. They will just get this as an addition. So a lot of these kind of immersive experience will be kind of bolted on to the normal voyages, but people are just literally getting, again, more for their money on these particular pieces. So news as well. Obviously, we've kind of got Russell Howard as a headliner, which everybody knows from Live at the Apollo, Mock the Week, all of these guys. We've got lots of kind of other well-known guys coming on. We've got up-and-coming people. We've also got alternative comedy, which is like more kind of the improv pieces. So it's not just stand-up pieces, which I think is a nice kind of touch too. As a heads up as well, we will be doing, and we've kind of got sign off for another big UK comedy festival for next year, and we will be doing a US comedy festival too on board the ship as well. So kind of stay tuned for that. We should be kind of announcing that hopefully kind of August time, but you will see a lot more kind of these immersive experience pieces popping up. And so again, like kind of really look into these because they are kind of worth looking at for your kind of prospective sailors. The other big piece is Halloween. Halloween is very important to us because we've not actually mentioned yet, obviously, adults only cruise line. This is a holiday that we can really lead into. Obviously, from a European perspective, it's definitely kind of getting a bigger holiday. Ultimately, in the US, it's massive. Like, people love this holiday. And again, it aligns with our brand so well because, like I say, it's an adults only piece. It means we can have lots of fun with costume parties. It means that we can get kind of new acts on. It just means that we can just have a really good time. So you will see year on year as well, we are building the Halloween kind of offerings for these pieces. So if anyone's asking about what I want to do in late October, please drive them towards these Halloween voyages because they will be good. We will be looking at kind of doing them from halfway through October So it's not just the one voyage. They will be starting mid-October all the way to the end of October. And they will, obviously, you'll get lots of different kind of experiences on board the ship. We're also doing kind of like high price giveaways on these things as well. So like we're really encouraging people to kind of turn up in full costume. We had such a riot with it last year as well. Again, this is something that we really want to build on year on year. And yeah, I suppose that was kind of high level it. I know I've kind of whizzed through that, but if anyone's got any kind of questions, I know we're probably on a bit of a short deadline, but I'll pass it back to Mr. Luke Day, and Layla.
Let me in, producers. There we are. Jamie, I'm not going to lie, pal. You have been getting a lot of love in the chat here. A lot of love. People saying it's absolutely. So we got Gillian says it's amazing. Kerry says it's so interesting to hear how everything came about. All the things that she absolutely loves. What have we got?
I didn't actually get to see any of these.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Great. Oh, that's cool.
Here, you're a genius, Jamie, says Sonia. Sonia says, was the round bed too expensive to produce?
The round bed.
I think you might mention something about different shaped beds in one of the suites, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Very clever, super info, loving it. Really interesting to hear. Sue says, this has given me so much more of an insight into VV and whys and wherefores. Incredible knowledge that Jamie has. He must literally eat, sleep and breathe Virgin.
Sadly, yes.
Yes. Larry says, my sailors have been asking me about music, fab music all around the ships, but not really any music choice in the cabins, i.e. via the TV, which has surprised them being Virgin. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, there was. So originally on the original plan, obviously, it comes down to a safety feature ultimately. So actually what we wanted to do was put in kind of wireless speakers, because again, rather than kind of like people would bring their own phones and connect to something, it all goes back to like the safety system on the ship. So let's say, there's an emergency, we needed to control all of the speakers basically on the ship. So we kind of moved away from that. There is a part of kind of a program going on at the minute to add music to the TV as well at a later point. And there's lots of kind of licensing things with that, but that is kind of a longer term vision on those pieces. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Speaking of music, Daniel's come up with a suggestion for us. Luke and Layla, can we try and get the Venga Boys on the cruise? Daniel, I don't know if the Venga Boys are. I don't know how old they are anymore. It's quite. While we're at it, let's
the Venga bus must still be going.
Yeah, still doing the tours, still touring the Balearics.
Exactly.
Melanie, this is so interesting. I've learned so much about the session. Hina, jumping ahead as the first one hasn't even sailed yet. Are there any more plans for any other comedy fests on board?
Yeah, there are comedy festivals. So we're going to do a big one again next year. So a lot of these things, and we'll be brutally honest, is like the planning that it takes to do these things. We're kind of like literally dipping a toe in the ocean on these pieces this year. So like obviously the run up until September now is obviously quite short, but we really want to get to a minimum of a year out announcing these pieces, so we can really, one, from a talent perspective, we can book better talent, and also from a sales and your guys' perspective, it just gives a lot more awareness from marketing and kind of the sales driven pieces. We will be doing them, and I'm pretty sure off the top of my head they're in August next year. That is going to be a UK one and a US one.
Amazing. Oh, good stuff. And Russell Howard, legend.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah,
it's going to be a good one.
And also, this guy sells out venues for 6 to 8, 10,000 people. It's going to be like a really cool, small, intimate gig, which is even better.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a good thing on that, where obviously people are going to be surprised, because I think that voyage was already quite well booked anyway, but it's like people are hopefully going to be very, very kind of pleasantly surprised when they wake up with that email that, hey, this has been turned into kind of a comedy voyage. So yeah.
So good. Imagine, I'm just going to pop to the Red Room to see Russell Howard do a stand-up set. It's amazing. There's not much love for Venga Boys. I'm sorry, Daniel. And then Stacey, I was so immersed in listening to the session, Jay, I nearly forgot to answer the poll questions. That's all good. There was a question for Jonathan. Can I still attend Sip and See if we haven't received the package? Yeah, absolutely. Join in with that. You'll just maybe bring some squash. Maybe bring a beer. I don't know. But yeah, feel free to come along because we're going to talk about why we don't do drinks packages on board a Virgin Voyages ship. Instead, we offer bar tab and fair pricing throughout the ship as well. And we partner with Unfiltered to understand their approach to our food festival. There we go. And then Kerry, literally one of the best sessions I've attended. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge and experience, Jamie. Do you know what? It is a great session, but Kerry, I'm equally offended. You attend quite a lot of my sessions.
Oh, Kerry, look what you've done now.
Thank you very much. Hina, this is a nice one.
Yes.
Other than comedy and Halloween, are there any other themed cruises planned or in the pipeline?
There is, yeah. So we're going to launch, like I say, the end of July. We should have up the kind of the full 2025 schedule. But going back to kind of like what we were saying about the pillars, we will definitely be doing kind of like wellness pieces around the kind of the January months. That will be basically a wellness month all month. We will then be bringing back Elevate as well. So Elevate was really around kind of like. Almost kind of like bridging kind of like well-being, holistic well-being with entrepreneurship. Into these kind of like nicer packages. So we're doing, you'll see kind of like a lot more, anyone that knows about Summit at Sea is kind of like building it kind of more into that kind of packaging. So there's lots more kind of theme pieces coming up. And like I said, we haven't kind of landed on a complete name for it yet. Like they're known as immersive experiences within the business, but from a kind of an outward state of facing piece, we will probably have a name change, but we'll obviously let you know what they all are, and then we'll launch the calendar. And we've also locked something in for 2026, which is pretty awesome as well, which you'll hear about August 14th time.
Woo! That is hot off the press.
Yeah.
Spilling tea, a little tea.
Too hot. Yeah.
Brilliant, cool. Well, that's it, guys. That's all we got time for. We're going to release you back to your daily lives. But please tune in at 4 p.m. today for Sip and See. What was it called? Sip and See.
Sip and See. Yeah.
Sip and See. There we go. Tune in for Sip and See at 4 p.m. today, where we will learn all about bar tab, all about why we don't do drinks packages, and we'll hear from our good friends over at Unfiltered. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for this morning, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone. Goodbye.
Cheers, guys. Thanks.